Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, How the Teff Company Leverages NetSuite for Agriculture in Their Growth Strategy. I'm Rebecca Rowe, the Marketing Director here at Myers-Holum, and I'll be emceeing. We're very excited to have three speakers with us today. TJ Anderson, the Business Manager at the Teff Company, Hamza Zia, the Director of Solution Architecture at Myers-Holum, and Amr Hasmi, one of the principal consultants. Now, without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to you, Hamza.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started here. Really excited about showing you guys this end-to-end kind of process of how specifically the TEFCO uses NetSuite. And we'll kind of talk through how specifically they use it in the certain circumstances that they came to Myers-Holum with, and ultimately what we've devised for them in terms of a plan so they can scale and grow, not only as their operations grow, but also just from a system and bandwidth perspective as well. We understand that, for example, Myers-Holum, our day job is to implement NetSuite. It is all we do. But every time we work with organizations like the TEFCO or other farming operations or any other vertical-based organization, you guys are balancing your day jobs with the NetSuite implementation. So we make sure at the end of the day that that balance is perfectly balanced in terms of a seesaw on one side and the other. And we're not overloading you in terms of the responsibilities that may exist and working with you in the pre-sale cycle to define that. And one of the assets that I can even talk to you about right now is just a client resource allocation breakdown. So in every single one of our engagements, we put a timeline so you know exactly how long it's going to take to actually take you all live in a certain time frame. And accompanied with that, it'll also tell you, hey, for example, your finance person is going to have to allocate X amount of hours per week, and that's what we recommend. So going into it from an investment standpoint, you understand that from both sides of the fence, which is extremely important in a transformation like this, because at the end of the day, it is time. So without any more introductions here, I'll go into the agenda. So one of the first things that we're going to cover is obviously the introductions. Rebecca's kind of introduced me already so far, but I'll get into a little bit more of my background. But we've got two other great people here on the call, which we'll introduce here in a second. TJ Anderson from the TEFCO, Amr, who was actually boots on the ground from a consulting standpoint and actually delivered the product for the TEFCO. We'll also kind of define what the Teff Company does. You know, the Teff Company and Teff in general, for a lot of the folks on the call, are probably Googling on the side what Teff is. And I encourage you to do that, but TJ is definitely going to go into it here in a second as well. So you understand how Teff basically came to the US, what TJ and his team have essentially done to grow that portfolio, and ultimately the benefits of Teff and how that interacts ultimately with NetSuite is what we'll get into. I'll get into how the Teff Company leverages NetSuite. You've heard me say this a lot, but it's extremely important because it helps you understand what they came to us with and how we ultimately scaled and positioned them to scale and grow with the staircase or stairway approach, as we like to call it. There's a NetSuite demo that I'll also go through here today. There's going to be two flavors to that demo. The first flavor of the demo is going to be our core offering, which is our grower management portfolio. So a lot of the field management operations can be conducted right in NetSuite. All of that is visible on your dashboard right when you log in. So you're not sifting through NetSuite to try to find information, which is key. And it drives more efficiency at the end of the day for each one of the users interacting with NetSuite. And then on top of that, we also have a second part to that portfolio for some of the more potentially advanced clients that we have on the call here today, our prospective clients, where we've actually devised an entire process for something that's very common in your industry called grower payables. So grower payables is inherent in almost every single one of our engagements that we follow through within agricultural space. And everyone does it a little bit differently. I will preface that, but at the end of the day, everyone does do it in a certain capacity. So today's demo is really to outline and show that we've got a core offering for that, but ultimately we can tweak it based on the different attributes, which I can touch upon again in the demo. And then finally, we'll open it up for any questions that you all may have. I encourage you, if you guys have questions as we're going through this, please type it in the chat and we'd be more than happy to address them at the end of the webinar. Okay. So the panelists, so you've already heard me speak a lot here today, so I'll kind of continue on the train here. My name is Hamza. I'm the director of our solution architecture practice. So I'm really responsible for everything related to the pre-sale side of the organization. I would directly work with prospective clients like yourselves to understand the core operations of what you guys are coming from, what you guys are going to, and ultimately we're also providing recommendations in that cycle. There is no way that I would ever, or any of our solutions architects that fall under my team would copy paste what you guys are doing right now. There's always going to be efficiency that we're trying to introduce as you're moving to a new system, new processes, and a big part of that is the change management aspect. So it's not just digitizing your process in NetSuite. There's a lot of other facets that come with that that we'll obviously speak to you about from a more long-lasting impact. I'll also have Amer introduce himself here in a second. Amer is one of our principal consultants who was engaged on the Teff Co's implementation. So I'll pause there, and Amer, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amer. I worked with TJ for almost, what now, 5-6 months to get the project live. And yeah, we got there. So I'll turn it on for TJ.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. TJ Anderson, business manager at the Teff Company. Fairly small company, and so we wear a bunch of hats here, but one of mine was handling the overall NetSuite project and the transition and go live activities. And for those of you, as we move into the next slide, for those of you that were Googling, you can kind of fact check me on what Teff is and all. It's an ancient grain and originally from East Africa and Ethiopia and Eritrea. It's a staple in their cuisine. It's a tiny grain, about the size of a poppy seed, and is chiefly used in flour form to make a fermented flatbread called injera. So that's been our primary clientele over the last 30 to 35 years, where we've been growing Teff actually in Idaho and surrounding states. Our founders spent some time in Ethiopia in the 70s and kind of grew an appreciation for Ethiopian culture and understood how important Teff and injera was in their cuisine and their culture. Upon returning to the U.S. At that time in the 70s and 80s, there was some political and civil unrest in Ethiopia, and many were coming to emigrating to the U.S. And when they came here, they didn't know where to find this commodity or this product. Noting some similarities between the climate and ecosystem in Idaho and Ethiopia, decided to give it a shot in the backyard, milling it in a basement, kind of a tiny mill, and grabbed a phone book for the DC area, where a large, or maybe the largest portion of our customer base was and is, and started looking for names and cold calling people, looking to see who might be interested. And a few decades later, we're still still expanding and growing, and continue to be honored to really serve that customer base. At the same time, more people are realizing the value of Teff. It's highly nutritious for those with allergens. It's naturally gluten-free, and it tastes pretty good. So we're continuing to grow and see, really push the boundaries of what Teff can be used for, as more people become aware of ancient grains and some of the benefits of adding more diversity into their diet. In this last bullet, I mentioned, we've been continuing to grow, our farmer network and expand our food safety and quality requirements. All of these things need to move in lockstep. And when we were looking for a CRM ERP solution, we were looking for something that could accommodate those aspects as well.
That's perfect. That's a great introduction, TJ. I really appreciate the background there.
Sure.
So I'll step into the next part of the slide here. And that really is this stairway approach. So the reason why I wanted to outline this is because we want to help the folks on the call understand that you don't have to have this big bang approach as you move into an implementation cycle. It is not something that we recommend either, relative to obviously the potential circumstances that you all have, where we pivot towards a big bang. But generally, TJ and his team are a great example at Teff Company, where they use this stairway approach to ultimately build the pyramid appropriately and have started to kind of put the puzzle pieces together on top to go with that extra mile. But it all starts from that base of that pyramid. We've established that base of that pyramid for the Teff Co extremely well. And based off of conversations with TJ and the team, for them, and it's different for everyone, for them, it was specifically financial, CRM, and marketplace integrations. So within that 4 or 5 to 6 month time frame, based off of the implementation cycle, we were essentially able to get their financials up and running in NetSuite directly. Inventory has now been synced with their Shopify e-commerce platform. They're using CRM, and they're also using a flavor of our grower management solution more so for the field operations standpoint directly in their environment. So you can kind of understand for them, that was the core. That's what they needed to effectively go live and not take a step back as they transition to a NetSuite environment, which is another key thing. Whenever we go through these evaluation cycles in the pre-sale side, specifically my team and myself would understand that this is what you currently need, and we want to make sure that you're not taking a step back in any way to have redundant processes in the new NetSuite instance. But the one that I really want to focus on is the elevate phase, and this is really where the Teff Company is now progressing towards. They've understood the fundamental base of the pyramid, which is the established phase, and now we've moved towards the elevate. And again, this is unique and different for every single organization, and we'll work with you guys to understand what that looks like. Specifically for TJ and his team, it was the manufacturing side. So now we're going to effectively bring that operation into NetSuite to have a core understanding of cost of goods sold, work order management, and be able to see that from field to fork type traceability all happening in NetSuite, right? A company with that demand and supply planning. So really kind of flipping that switch literally in NetSuite to be able to define what that demand is relative to obviously the supply chain right now, which is, I think everyone's aware of, but we can get it as close as possible to the inputs that we essentially put into NetSuite. And then they're also looking to explore some of the more advanced functionality within our grower management portfolio as they grow. And then expand, accelerate, and dominate are really stages that are going to be fluid in certain formats. They're not always going to be perfect, and they're not always going to be defined to what we effectively call out right when we kick off the project. ERP implementations are fluid, and those are always going to be adjusting. But as of right now, the expand phase is going to really to digitize their warehouse operations processes as well. So actually using handheld scan gun devices, also called WMS for NetSuite, to take that pick, pack, ship process and digitize that with scan guns. So a very key and important piece, which ultimately is going to reduce any type of, paper or, pick tickets from a paper format perspective. So you're saving trees there as well, and ultimately can kind of drive that growth. Okay. And then accelerate and dominate really is that reporting and intelligence enhancements, which NetSuite inherently has built out. And it's more so about just taking those data points and extracting them in a way where you can now present it in board meetings, in reports, have KPIs from your vendor's perspective, see essentially a scorecard and score them based off of negotiated rates, right? All of that intelligence is directly in NetSuite, and it's more so about just getting as much detail in there so you can get as the most valuable amount of information out of the system as well. Perfect. So what we wanted to do here with this fireside chat is to give you a background and kind of open those closed doors and really help you understand based off of the conversations that we're going to have here with TJ, what it was actually like behind the scenes. It's not always rainbows and butterflies in an implementation. It is hard work. However, the fruits that you gain from an ERP implementation are extremely, extremely valuable. Specifically from my side, because I've seen thousands of them now at this point in time, and our referenceable customers can definitely vouch for all of those activities, right? So the first kind of item, TJ, that I really want to ask you is the teetering point that a lot of the folks on the call here, in my opinion, are kind of battling. And it's, what were those decision points in your journey from a Teff Co perspective that you decided, hey, we need an ERP system put in place And if we don't, this might be an issue. So what was that tipping point?
Well, yeah, there wasn't any kind of one moment where we knew automatically, but maybe an accumulation of different factors that were playing into it. And originally we were looking for a CRM solution, mostly because we had multiple team members on the customer service side. They were dealing with the same customers, and the correspondence was via email, via verbal conversation, via post-it note. And we really needed a way to get everything into one system for more kind of streamlined communication and to avoid things falling through the cracks. We from there, as we were looking at different options, we were kind of hesitant to get into the grower and manufacturing side of things, because we think our business is fairly unique and had some intricacies that might not fit well into a system. When we learned about some of the options and the capabilities with NetSuite, and especially working with MHI, who had some obviously expertise in the grower side of things, we felt more comfortable with expanding that and really kind of taking more of a leap and moving basically all of our operations, or as many as we possibly could, into NetSuite. Anything that wasn't initially there being moved in over time.
That's perfect. And I think one of the value adds that I've definitely seen for you folks is that connection between Shopify and NetSuite specifically, because now you have real-time inventory visibility. Your customers see the exact same things that you're seeing as well in NetSuite, which is great. What was the implementation process like? So just kind of talk to me about that from your side. Also, based on this potentially being your first kind of ERP transformation, what that process also looked like as well, potentially.
Yeah, certainly. So I had seen other implementations in previous roles, but with much larger teams with many more resources available. So with a small team, with just about 20 team members, there weren't a ton of resources to kind of maintain on day-to-day operations while also taking on this project. So working with a consultant or somebody that could kind of hold our hands and really tell us what we don't know, and help tease out some of the processes and concepts and capabilities of the process and how they matched with our own process was really helpful. I think early on it was called like the discovery process, and it was just a series of interviews, right, where you were saying, well, how do you do this and how do you do this? And we may not have even labeled any activities that we were doing in that way, but we soon discovered those are the activities we were doing, and scoping out the processes and any gaps that may have existed between what was going to be necessary in NetSuite and what we needed from a business application side of things. So that was really helpful from the onset. And then throughout the process, really having MHI kind of schedule meetings for us and telling us about the various stages of the process was really helpful. Again, we have our hands full already. So to take on this additional project of moving our processes and activities and moving everything into NetSuite was a lot to take on. And so it's helpful to have somebody kind of ushering us through that.
That's awesome. So you're in full transparency, there's two types of clients that I specifically see. One is, hey, I want to be told what to do. And then there's other clients who've gone through implementations that are saying, okay, that we've done this before, so we can kind of meet that bridge in the middle as well. So we can pivot accordingly to either which option. But from your perspective, that makes complete sense. In you don't know what you don't know. So we want us to tell us everything. So that's perfect. And then how has NetSuite really transformed your business? I love asking this question because when we talk, TJ, in the sales cycle, 6-8 months back, it's all of these future forward looking items. So it's always good to see it actually come into fruition. So can you kind of just talk to me about how the transformation has happened? What are those efficiency adds? Where the shifts do you see that have happened in your day-to-day from a no more manual work perspective?
Yeah. Say on the customer service side, we've seen a lot of those in terms of having kind of all of our notes and correspondence, transactions all in one system, so that multiple team members on the sales and customer service side can view the same thing and avoid kind of duplicating efforts or letting things fall through the cracks. On the manufacturing side, which we have started transitioning to, I would say we're somewhere between the initial stages you listed in your chart in the previous slide. One of the big things, actually, which might sound not great for some, but was really helpful for us, is the structure of NetSuite and having the requirements for certain types of data has highlighted issues with our processes and has kind of helped avoid things fall through the cracks. We have a lot of our processes that are on paper or have been on paper. And whether it's handwriting or losing paperwork or those types of things, basically NetSuite's not going to allow you to move forward without addressing the issue in some way. And that's been really helpful in terms of shoring up some of the maybe data accuracy issues or process flow issues.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's incredible to hear, and always something that I love hearing in terms of success stories. And then the last question I really have for you is, and I know I beat the horse dead with this specific statement, but you guys are an incredible example of a Stairway Approach client of ours, right? Where we balance the appropriate workload for your internal capacity based on resources, like you mentioned, with what is truly required for the initial go live operations. And I know you've already kind of gave us a little sneak peek about what that next stage is for you folks in NetSuite and your journey, but do you want to elaborate on that for us a little bit more and what that next stage is you see?
Sure. Yeah. Some of them are just a matter of getting more familiar with the system and having more and more of our team members spend more of their time in it.
Right.
Other parts are, more stair-step approaches where, we haven't gone through a harvest of Teff within NetSuite yet. We went live post our 2021 harvest. And so a lot of those activities are going to lean on the grower management capabilities within NetSuite. And so it's exciting to see how we might be able to kind of better organize and coordinate those efforts and the data surrounding that, all within one system.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate this, TJ. I hope that gave insight into the folks on the call here today. Hearing it first from someone who is potentially, was exactly in where your potential issues are in potentially transitioning to NetSuite. Again, appreciate everything, TJ.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. So the next piece really is going to be the NetSuite demo, as promised. We keep good things packaged up to the last minute. So we'll go through here for the demo. As I mentioned, there's two flavors to the demo. The first part of the demo is really going to be catered towards our grower management solution. So a couple of key things that I'll focus on is block and field tracking, right? So having that OpEx tracking directly from a functional standpoint to see, okay, I've got A&M farms, and they've got these specific blocks and fields. So if you need to have that granularity to track those operations, we can have that all done, and all the attributes associated with a certain block, and ultimately tagging that on certain transactions like purchase orders, for example. Having that full traceability back to your financial system is the beauty of NetSuite. So I'll go through that. There is also a very recent addition that we've added to our bundle that also allows us to have a Google Maps integration. So we heard from a lot of our clients that, hey, I want to have a visual depiction of seeing a heat map, for example, for potentially all of the farms I may need to visit in a certain day from a QA standpoint, or it may just be, hey, these are all the appointments I have to go see them in a given time frame. And seeing that on a heat map perspective allowed them to do that. It can even be as granular as to go down to the nth and the depths of it by actually saying on a certain farm, these are the longitude and latitudes for certain areas, so you can track block level activity on a certain farm. So that even to that level of depth is something we can do within the Google Maps integration. And the great thing is it's all in your dashboard, so you don't have to go fishing for it. It's right there in front of you. And then the second part of the demo is going to be what we call a grower payable suitelet. If you have already kind of heard, we put suite in front of everything. So a suitelet is essentially a custom solution that we have put together for one of our clients, which allows us to have multiple attributes put into play that ultimately then puts an output, which is a payment record. So for example, this client had certain base level prices for a certain product. And then based off of certain attributes for them, it was specifically grading material. So based on a certain grade of product that was received into their facilities, they were either able to conduct deductions off of what they were originally agreed upon in terms of price with the vendor, or bonuses, right? That we want to reward these growers as well. So there's two aspects to that suitelet, as we like to call it. And accompanied with that is also schedules. So a lot of these, farms and growers that we work with have unique schedules. They might want a 10% deposit up front. They might want 5% or 5% payment increments after the fact. So all of those miniature kind of attributes can be built into either the transaction itself that we are doing payments off of, or have one generic payment schedule for a certain vendor, right? So that level of depth and detail is all possible within NetSuite. So I'll step into the demo here now, folks. So I'll transition over to my NetSuite instance. And this is NetSuite, specifically a demo account that we have with the bundles included in. So the first thing I really want to just focus on is the dashboard. So you see the dashboard view here. At the end of the day, all of this detail could be customized to what your liking is, what you want to see. If Joe from manufacturing wants to see something separate, we can show them that. If the controller wants to see something else, that's fine. If the field ops person wants to see some other detail, that's fine as well. We can always tailor and accommodate for what we're looking for. But I'll go through this more in detail, but you can kind of see from a farming operations detail who the grower is for certain farms that I may be working with, some functional information related to block field tracking, and all of these fields are customizable. These are based off of our core base package, but again, everyone does it a little bit differently. So we can always add a custom field for whatever attributes you're looking for, and then ultimately pull them onto this dashboard that you're seeing here as well, right? Even field map images, so that level of depth and actually seeing the visual is definitely something we can do. One last thing I'll just belabor here is that everything is editable. So if I want to just step in and change a couple of fields, that's fine. I don't have to dive into those transactions. I can just go ahead and update them appropriately. Okay. So these are just some of the searches that we've kind of put together here, which allow you all to just log in, see a quick snapshot of everything that's happening. But if we want to dive a little bit more in detail, everything is within our grower management tab here. So you got your growers up top here, you've got your farms and blocks and fields here as well. So if I just in a new tab, open up a block and field aspect here and maybe go to the Henderson block, for example, the information that I was seeing on my dashboard is just a snapshot of what you see here. So pictures, images, bed lengths, bed widths, estimated acreages, all of that detail is on these records that we would essentially create for you, or effectively would just be built in our bundle, accompanied with that based on what you're looking for on some of the more detailed or granular or regulation-based operations like field and lot samples or field measurements. Those can be sub-records of this block and field. So it always ties back together. And if I'm someone in the operations side, I can just dive in and see exactly what block I need to go to, and it's all aggregated there for me to ultimately handle and take on, right? So this is a field lot sample. And all this information can ultimately be, pulled back into the dashboard as well. So just different levels and depths of detail. It can be simple, or it could be quite deep as you're looking for, based on the requirements that you technically have. Okay. Lastly here, we have this Google Maps integration. So you can see for development purposes only here that we've got the watermark for. But at the end of the day, it kind of gives you a visibility into, hey, we've got this specific heat map here for the Henderson farm. And for my specific instance for this client, they wanted a heat map of times to visit this certain farm. And we can do that based off of putting longitude and latitude, values on the actual vendor record, which would automatically pop them onto this portlet that you see here, and be able to use that accordingly as needed. Right now, I just have two, so the Jameson farm and then the Henderson farm that we see up top here, but you can have a full heat map, as I mentioned, of all the farms, or one specific farm that we can dive into and see that block level detail if required. Okay, perfect. Another aspect that I just quickly want to touch upon is, as I promised, that OpEx tracking activity. Now, you've seen all this information related to blocks and farms and fields, all of that informational activity. But the real beauty of NetSuite, as I mentioned, is to tie that back to the financials, right? So one quick report that I just want to pull up just for visual purposes is this open PO report. Let me just kind of remove all these filters here for us, and I'll come back to those here in a second. But this is an open PO report for all of my purchase orders that I just wanted to consolidate a little bit. But you can see on this open PO report, I can see all the necessary fields that I need to, who the vendor is, what the current status of that PO is, what the amount is as well, what crop year is it related to, and then the block field and farm as well. So if I wanted to have specifically an open PO report relative to a certain block or field or even a farm, I can just go in and change it to Clarkson, right? Refresh, and the data set automatically updates relative to that. Even though this may seem super simple from a reporting, consolidation, and also from a tieback reconciliation perspective, this is extremely, extremely important for us to be able to generate grower statements, which is another part of our module. It's also able to send reports on a scheduled basis as required, but grower statements is one of our bigger items that comes in our bundle, which I'll talk about here in a second in the more advanced grower management solution. But just to kind of show you that slicing and dicing of information can all happen within NetSuite. Okay, perfect. So the second part is now where we really get into the more advanced part of our solution. And this is based off of more recent examples. Just give me 1 second here. This is based off more recent examples, but at the end of the day, the premise of this solution that we have is to automate the grower payable side. So any of the accounting folks who may be on the call here from our prospective clients, you can kind of understand the pain points that may exist with this process. And we've really been able to digitize it as best as possible for us to allow it to essentially kind of flip the switch and put it on autopilot with the appropriate approvals and SOPs put in place. So we will definitely have a conversation with you about that. But again, if I go to the grower management tab here, from a management perspective, I talked a little bit about grower statements or potentially grower payable reports. All of this is built in the solution based off of certain filters we can put in, such as, you know, which grower we want to generate it for and what time periods we want to generate it for. It'll pull in all the appropriate information for it to distribute, and ultimately a PDF would be generated. But what I really want to focus on are these three attributes here: set face prices, price deductions and potential bonuses, and the payment schedule. So depending on how you all do this, for every single crop year, we can have different varieties of products. Every single variety of product could have a current base rate associated with it. Now, these could be rates that you mandate as the monopolized potential farmer, or it could be market prices that we include in here based off of crop year. And ultimately, it defines a fundamental base for us to be able to drive some of the more logic that we'll get to here in a second. Okay, so this is one of the fundamental records that would be required for our solution. The second is a price deduction list. So you'll see here, based on the type of product that I have, I'm able to have a deduction, as you can see here, or a certain bonus. So for example, if I go to size jumbo, which is prominent in walnuts, it's prominent in lemons, those industries, you can see what, based off of certain values of a low and high percentage that you see here, what that deduction looks like, right? For this client, it was specifically based on grade, but for you folks or anyone else on the call, it could be based off of other attributes like timely delivery, or it could be based off of certain other variables that are appropriate to your operations. So the low and high is really just a field that can ultimately be used for whatever your use case may look like. We also, in that list here, also have bonuses. So based off of certain bonuses, we can have that kind of tailored to either certain growers, or have it also tailored to a certain low and high threshold based off of the attribute, as I mentioned, that could be at play here. Okay. And then finally, we have our payment schedules. So payment schedules are something that have really revolutionized more of the payment generation side. You don't want to just be sitting behind your computer and trying to calculate when to pay someone what. You want the system to tell you when to do that, right? So through our payment schedule process here, we can really hear the grower and be able to appropriately set a payment schedule to them based off of certain time schedules being met, certain percentages being met for a split payment based on 25, 25, 25 appropriately, or split accordingly. And you can see all of that here. This will make a little bit more sense when I get into the actual transactions, because you'll see it broken out per payment. But those would be the kind of fundamental records for us to really be able to move forward with. Okay, so in the interest of time, I have created the transactions for us to really review. So I'm going to start off with a purchase order here. This purchase order is created for HMZ farmers. You can see the product here at the line level. You can even see the field. You can see the crop year. All of that detail is on this transaction. And then if I go to the related records transaction here, the receipts and bills, what I'm looking for is that there is a receipt record. This receipt record in NetSuite allows us to track the grade that is associated with us actually receiving that product into our warehouse. So if I open that up here, what I really want us to focus on is this grading result. Now, we could either have an integration to whatever grading system that you guys have that is on premise, right, or is a cloud-based system, or we can import that information into NetSuite based on the grading activity at the end of every single day, end of every single week, whatever that frequency is. We just want certain variables put in the system so all of those base prices, price deductions that I was showing you previously can now be put into motion, and the magic behind the scenes, aka the scripts that we have running, would be able to automatically calculate that information based on what's in this, for example, grading result that would be imported in or integrated from one of your grading systems, and appropriately the breakdown of whether a deduction or a bonus needs to be applied is automatically conducted. That breakout is also something that we can provide to you. So if there needs to be vetted or checked, that could definitely be done at a transactional level. And then ultimately from that perspective, what NetSuite is able to do and our solution is able to do is generate a bill, a vendor bill for that consolidated activity, which is inclusive of the bonus, which is inclusive of the deductions as well. So you're taking that manual work out of the picture and allowing NetSuite to perform all those operations for you. So the byproduct, as I mentioned, is really this vendor bill that you see here. Everything is tied together. You can see the grading result record as a link there, the product there. You can also see the purchase order that it was created from, and ultimately the accounting behind the scenes, which is all shown in the GL impact in the background there. Okay. And then from this standpoint, it would be up to accounts payable to run through and actually generate the payment records for these bills based off of a certain schedule. So for our purposes here, For our purposes here, these folks had a payment schedule set forth in this certain format, right? So you have a 10% first, 50, 80, and then based off of the values, we were able to conduct the appropriate payments, and the automatic bills would be generated according to this. So it's very customizable. It's totally dependent on what that payment schedule specifically looks like for either a vendor, or you can override that for a specific transaction, like you see here that I'm on the purchase order for, right? And then the appropriate bills would be generated that you see here. This is just one of those bills based off of that purchase order schedule. And then, as I mentioned, all of this would just be consolidated either into one payment that would go through approvals. So we would have a approved vendor payment process here. So we're not, willy-nilly just cutting out checks to everyone. We are going through an appropriate process to do that, and checks and balances are being met based on cash flow. Or you can just go ahead and run that on a schedule as well. Okay. So I hope that gave you all visibility into the two different sides that we have to our grower management solution. Now, this is just a snippet of what we can do. There are more functionalities existing in our grower management solution, specifically, which I think is the most valuable, are these grower statements. So we'd be more than happy to show you that in a more one-on-one demo or conversation if required, because that is something that's quite difficult and is managed in Excel for a lot of our growers and clients of ours. So if we can digitize that process, it's extremely valuable and helpful. Okay. I know we've got a lot of questions here, which is good. So I'm going to pivot back to our PowerPoint deck here, and we can end it off with, just close all these out, with a Q&A. So I know this is some time that you have to take out, folks, so I appreciate you all sticking around for this, but we'd be more than happy to kind of take all these questions here and run through it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hamza. I wanted to start with one that I know that has come through here. It's, how did the employees accept the new system and processes? I think that's one for you, TJ. And then there's a sister question that that I'll ask Amir after TJ has a chance to answer this one.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's all been pretty positive from the very beginning. We knew it was going to be important to have kind of upper management approval of the program and really an endorsement so that we could confidently kind of spread that to the team and make sure that there was going to be backing at all levels. And from there, we did our best to be fairly proactive with communication and tried to keep people involved in the process. There's certainly been some maybe challenges in transitioning from one spot to another, but I think it's all been done with with quite a bit of patience and understanding, and people are eager to get in and learn and see how they can make an impact.
Sounds like you have a great team. So I think this one's for Amr. What's involved in change management in general? Like if you go across your projects, what have you come across, and how do you handle some of the challenges that TJ and team have come across, and others as well?
Right. So one of the things we actually came across was, for example, the lot identification on a sales order, right? So this was one of the requests that TJ and the Teff team wanted visibility on showing what components went into an assembly or a final product, and this visibility shows to the customer. So it might sound as easy as I just said, but it actually took time and back and forth between the MHI team and the Teff team. And I also have to say that the Teff team were not just prepared, but they did the work, so they already had a process, they had a problem, we provided solutions, they tested those problems and solutions, and then they came back, with updates. So it was definitely a back and forth conversation until we reached hopefully, I think it was a good solution.
Yep.
Excellent. So I think we have time for one more question, and that is, what are your recommendations for agriculture businesses in terms of adopting NetSuite ERP based on your experience? And maybe, TJ, if you have any kind of thoughts on or recommendations that you would have, just having gone through this recently and having a successful implementation, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and obviously there are so many different types of agricultural companies. I would say for us, it was really important for us to kind of understand the aspects of the business that were most important to preserve as is, so that we could try and translate those into NetSuite. On the other side, it was kind of exploring NetSuite's capabilities and understanding how we might kind of transfer or tweak some of our processes to fit into most, best into what NetSuite was offering. And that's an area where it was really helpful to have MHI involved to help kind of, make ends meet we didn't necessarily know what the NetSuite capabilities were. We just knew things that we needed to continue using from a lot traceability perspective, from a yield perspective, from a order to cash perspective. And so we knew things that we needed to preserve from a data perspective, but didn't exactly know how that might translate to NetSuite. I hope that was helpful.
That's very helpful, actually, yes. And what advice would you have, Hamza, for companies looking to change their system?
Jump off the diving board into the deep end. That would be my recommendation. No, all jokes aside, it is a process that's systematic, and we want to make sure that we took the appropriate steps with you in the pre-sale cycle. So all of those questions that are kind of you're holding back potentially in the chat right now, I recommend that you just send either myself, Rebecca, or someone from our side an email. I'll be more than happy to speak to you about some of the specific details. And there are 3 questions here in the chat that I definitely do want to address before we end off here, specifically for Fernando, Jeremy, and Lawrence. So Fernando, excuse me. Fernando, from your side, in terms of the GL, sub-GL project codes, that is all core NetSuite, right? We saw a snippet of that today with when I went to the GL impact screen on the purchase order and the vendor bill. But you would have your natural account, which would be your core account, your 6,000 series account, for example, for expenses. Then your sub-GL could be a child account underneath that and underneath expenses. It could be, G&A, it could be marketing, it could be whatever. Again, simple examples. And then we also have project codes. So in a certain example, my farm or my block is a project code at the end of the day, but we also in NetSuite have true project codes. So you could do project costing, project accounting on the accounting side to see that P&L based off of that quote unquote project as well, to capitalize if necessary as well. So I hope that answered your question there, Fernando. Jeremy, from your side, where it's related to the milling, packaging, intrasystem activities and transfers associated to COGS, we can do that. It would just be through routing steps essentially within NetSuite and the certain work centers that we set up as well. So you would be able to compartmentalize that cost and see that appropriately on a labor report or within the GL compartmentalized as well. And then Lauren, from your standpoint, from a consulting standpoint, in terms of consultants, not only on just Teffco's engagement, but generally all of our engagements, at a minimum, we will have 3. So we would have a delivery manager, and they would be responsible for making sure that the longevity of the implementation from start to finish, from a strategy perspective, from the ins and outs, they are providing that recommendation to TJ and Teffco and the team. This is someone who comes from industry. So we're not going to put someone who comes from like a not-for-profit background onto your engagement. We have a specific agricultural team that handles all of our agriculture engagements because it's such a big portfolio for us, and we've got incredible big logos in there. And based off of, again, that IP that we built, that delivery manager who is involved with every single one of those engagements can really pull and contrast what other players are doing in your space and provide that necessary recommendation, which I think is more important than anything from a business process perspective. Then you would have a consultant like Amer to really guide the implementation from a start to finish perspective, being boots on the ground with you. And then finally, we would also allocate an analyst. And the reason why we do that is because there's remedial activities with any implementation, like data loads and stuff like that. So we want to make sure that we are allowing a lower level resource who actually bills at a lower rate. So it's the most cost effective for you folks at the end of the day, and someone who has tens and 15 years worth of experience in NetSuite isn't doing that at a higher rate. So we're always balancing that to make it as efficient as possible for you all.
And sorry, from the Teffco side, we basically had 2 chief people, myself and our IT admin, helping with this. And then we were kind of bringing in people based on the module and area of expertise, or necessary inputs from a data requirements or business process requirements perspective. Primarily 2 people. Yeah, probably could have used more on our side actually, but yeah, that's why it was helpful to have MHI, helping on that side of things.
Well, excellent. Thank you for that answer, and thank you thank you all for your time today. I think this has been a good webinar and very insightful. So I think we're about at time here now, so we should probably wrap up. I want to thank you, TJ, again, Hamza and Amr, for your time, and we'll be getting out a link to the recorded webinar, and we'll also be sending out an agriculture white paper link too, so you'll have that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye.